Charlie, we appreciate your time. Welcome in. Obviously, I don't think there's any shortage of content for you by any means, but we'll start with the Reds. Look, we knew the Reds had to go get a manager. There was a long list of managers that they could have potentially went out and got, but were you even surprised that the manager, Terry Francona, that was the guy? Are you surprised that they were able to pull that off and name him the manager late last week?
Yeah, I don't even know that this is something they fully expected they'd be able to, and certain they'd be able to pull off until it really got done, just because of Terry Francona's a guy who had as much leverage as he'd want. Did he want to wait for a specific type of job? Did he want to stay in retirement? And the real story here is the fact that he specifically signed up and wanted to be a part of the Reds. Shows you everything you need to know about the confidence he has in the organization. It was an organizational win for the Reds getting Terry Francona. They were like, all right, do we want to do a manager search? We're ready to do a manager search. We have binders full of notes. Wait, or we could go out to let's go out to Tucson tomorrow and see if we can get Francona before we even get this process really started. That shows you how much separation there was between Francona and candidate number 2 on their list. They went out and got their guy, and now I guess the rest of a new window for the Reds starts.
You mentioned that it's kind of a new era here. We have I think a hope in this city that the Reds are going to go spend money. When you bring in Terry Francona, you're going to go out and spend money, help the roster out. I think, for the record, they spent money this past offseason. It just didn't work, given how many injuries occurred. Do you think the Reds will continue to spend this offseason? I know you tweeted out that they have to, or I guess it was Nick Krall who said it, though. Nick Krall said, we have to fix the outfield. The outfield wasn't good enough. Do you expect them to go out and get a right fielder?
They know their biggest need is a power-hitting right-handed, or I wouldn't just say right-handed, a power-hitting outfield bat or a third baseman. When I'm creating my watch list, or when I created my watch list for this offseason, it was power-hitting third basemen and outfielders, maybe a slight lean towards prioritizing the outfield, but Spencer Steer gives them some more flexibility. I keep waiting for someone to tell me publicly or privately that the Reds have the green light to spend aggressively this offseason. No one's told me that. The biggest theme has been uncertainty. We even had Nick Krall saying on the record, I don't know what our budget's going to be, and I don't know how the TV stuff, Bally going potentially bankrupt, is going to impact all this, and we might not have that final answer on the budget until the end of October. Not an ideal place to be whatsoever. That's why I have a lot of trade candidates specifically on my watch list for the Reds to add this offseason. I would say, even looking at the market, unless you can go out and get Santander, who would be the equivalent of getting Terry Francona on the free agent market this offseason, the best guy to get the Reds exactly what they need would come through the trade market. They have a surplus of guys in A-ball who I think other teams would be interested in. That could create a starting point for a groundwork for the Reds to get that type of player, or really multiple outfielders, which they could add.
I think if you look around the roster right now, we hoped this past offseason a lot of the rookies from 2023 were going to be able to continue that dominance. CES goes down. McClain never played. TJ Friedel, obviously not a rookie, but didn't start a lot of the season. Are you going to expect them to play a major factor coming into 2025 here?
Well, that's the thing. Something someone told me down the stretch was, for this to work, our aircraft carriers have to be in the building. And that's kind of a big picture quote. But you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
For this whole thing to work, they're not going to get Juan Soto, but the Reds have to go out and match Juan Soto or whoever they'd face in a potential playoff series down the road with the internal guys they're developing. And it's funny, too, look at the St. Louis Cardinals, a fascinating offseason for them. They've said, it's been a whole thing. The Cardinals' way has failed. It's over. It's dead. We've relied too much on free agency. Instead, we need to start putting our chips back into player development. And they're doing a massive sweeping set of organizational changes this offseason and into next offseason to make that happen. That's a reminder of free agency isn't a fix. Free agency is a way to supplement and support your roster. Trades are the same way. For this whole Reds thing to work, it has to be Elly, McClain, the pitching, Steer, Marte, the guys you mentioned. For this to work, it has to be those guys anyway in the first place. There's always going to be a priority on that type of development in Cincinnati.
Matt McClain to center field. I saw that, and I got a little nervous. I don't know if the Reds are actually going to do that, if that's just something they'll try out during spring training, or what the deal is there. But my concern would be the injury issues Matt has had for the past 2 years now, moving it out to the outfield, which obviously, anybody can get hurt, run into each other. There's more injuries, in my opinion, there than in second base. Do you expect Matt McClain? Because I think we also expected Jonathan India to go into the outfield this past season. Never happened. Do you think this was just some I don't want to say it's some a lie. But do you think this was just talk, or do you think they're actually going to try to put Matt McClain in the outfield?
So here's where they're at, and kind of the genesis of this was McClain wants to, or he played in the fall league the other day. He wants to be playing a lot more in the fall league, but the fall league's its own thing where it's hard to get at bats, and only certain guys can get certain amounts of at bats guaranteed. So what McClain told the Reds is, "I'll play anywhere in the fall league," and the Reds are like, "This is kind of interesting." And as you look at wanting to create the most flexibility for your roster as much as possible, all they've guaranteed is, McClain will play multiple positions in the fall league. And if McClain plays, he wants to play wherever just to get his at-bats. If he plays center and he looks good, they're keeping that window open towards having that be a conversation for the regular season as well. Let's say, there's really only one situation where it would make sense for him to play center, which is if the Reds got a great third baseman. They'd then make Santiago Espinal, or a good third baseman. They'd then make Santiago and Espinal, let's say, their everyday second baseman. I think he'll have a bigger role than you expect next year. And McClain's obviously a priority over Espinal. But if you're then also not able to get the outfielders you want, well, then you put McClain in center, Steer in left, and say Friedel in right. Maybe that's your best 9 with India as your DH. Maybe that's a situation where it makes sense. There's still a long way to go to get there. But when I asked Nick Kroll, is Matt McClain your second baseman? He said, no, we're going to see him look at different positions in the fall league.
My final Reds question before we switch over to the Bengals. Starting pitching, again, it was the best starting pitching season I've seen in a long time when they were healthy. Going into this coming season, you have the pitching depth. You have it in the minor leagues. You have it in the major leagues. Do you expect them to go out and I know there's a report that they're actively pursuing Sonny Gray. Do you expect them to go get another veteran starting pitcher, or are we going to roll with the guys we have?
Yes. Now, Sonny Gray is very interesting. We know the Reds are interested in him because they offered him a significant deal last offseason. I do get the sense, though, that now the whole money, Bally Sports, payroll, that's all a factor when you're looking at these conversations. For going out and getting a guy like Sonny Gray. Also, I will note Sonny didn't have as good of a season as you think he did. Not you, as general, plural you, think he did last year. That's something to keep in mind. They'll add a veteran starter.
Yeah.
But also kind of a huge story here that hasn't been discussed enough is, Derek Johnson and the pitching coaching staff has challenged Abbott and Lodolo specifically. Guys, you got to have a great offseason this year. You got to fix specific, parts of your overall makeup athletically, and not that they weren't doing it beforehand. Lodolo especially, he couldn't work out last offseason because he was coming off the injury. But they've told those guys, you've got to have big off seasons. It's got to be a best shape of your life type spring because they've worn down, especially Lodolo. It's led to minor injuries. Abbott, it's led to drop-offs in performances later in the year. And they've told them, guys, you've got to be stronger more overall to complete a season. They want that from them. And then I would certainly expect they'd add some sort of pitching help this offseason.